The countdown reads 89 minutes and 40 seconds, and I cannot make my hands hold still. My name is Nariel Kaas, and I serve as Senior Linguistics Officer aboard the Illyrian's Grace, flagship of Sovereign Ashkelon Voss, ruler of the Thren Imperium. Below the forward viewport hangs a world the locals call Earth, blue and white and turning slowly, entirely unaware that in less than an hour and a half it will belong to someone else. That is what everyone around me believes. For 9,000 years the Imperium has crossed the dark between stars, gathering worlds the way a river gathers stones, smoothing every one of them into the same shape. Every species we have approached has surrendered before the clock reached its final digit. Some surrendered in the first quarter hour, eager to prove their obedience before it was even demanded. There is a name for this ritual. We call it the reckoning hour. 90 minutes to choose between joining us and being erased. No world has ever chosen erasure. I was assigned to this fleet because I have spent most of my adult life learning human languages, all several thousand of them, badly translated into each other and worse translated into ours. For 8 years I sat in a listening post on the edge of their solar system, absorbing their music, their arguments, their strange and endless appetite for televised conflict. I believed by the end of those 8 years that I understood this species reasonably well. I was wrong. I simply did not know it yet. The Sovereign stands at the center of the bridge, robes catching the pale light thrown off the tactical displays. He rarely raises his voice. He has never needed to. When he speaks, every station on this ship goes quiet without being asked. "Begin the transmission," he says. I feed the recorded address into the translation array, converting our words into English and then into every other tongue this planet uses to talk to itself. My voice, run through the ship's systems, becomes the voice of an empire that has never once been refused. People of Earth, this is Sovereign Ashkelon Voss of the Thren Imperium. Your world has been observed, assessed, and found suitable for integration. Resistance against this fleet is not a strategy available to you. You have 90 minutes to accept the terms of peaceful union. Should no answer arrive by the end of that period, this fleet will proceed to secure your world by any means required. This is not a threat. It is simply what happens next. The choice is yours. The message goes out on every frequency the planet uses to speak to itself and to the stars beyond it. Radio, television, the tangled webs of satellite relay, even the old undersea cabling our engineers tapped months ago, while human scientists were still debating whether we were real. 90 minutes. That is the generosity we extend. 90 minutes to decide whether several billion people live comfortably as new subjects of the Imperium, or die under fire from ships they will never even see arrive. I expect noise. Every world we have ever approached responds within the first quarter hour with pleading, with offers, with the particular desperate music of a species trying to bargain its way out of the inevitable. Humanity has broadcast fear and hope and music into the void for over a century. I expect their channels to catch fire with panic. Instead, there is nothing. At first, no one on the bridge notices because silence is exactly what surrender sounds like in the moment just before it happens. It feels like a breath held before a door swings open. The Sovereign watches the countdown with his hands folded behind him, patient the way a predator is patient. I watch something else. I watch the sensor board. 30,000 vessels sit scattered in a loose, almost lazy formation around the planet's only moon. Their engines are cold. Their weapon signatures barely register. To every tactical officer aboard this ship, it looks like a fleet that surrendered to itself before we ever arrived, a graveyard waiting for us to come and claim it. A junior officer near my station laughs, a short startled sound, and says they must have given up the instant they saw our approach vector. I do not laugh. Something about that formation nags at me, though I cannot yet say what. 30,000 ships is not a small number. A frightened species does not build 30,000 hulls and then abandon them adrift like empty shells for an enemy to admire. Marshal Dre Solvith, second in command on this bridge, orders a deeper scan of the human fleet. I watch the results scroll past on my own console, and my unease thickens with every line. Life signs across most of the vessels are minimal. Weapon batteries show power readings barely above dormant. These ships are not crewed for a fight. They may not be meaningfully crewed at all, Solveth turns to the sovereign. My lord, the enemy formation appears to be a screen. Automated hulls, most likely unarmed or carrying weapons too weak to matter. Their true strength may be concealed elsewhere, or it may not exist. The sovereign's expression does not change. Then their weakness runs deeper than we believed, he says. Let them watch their empty ships drift while their world learns fear. It changes nothing. The hour will end, as every hour, before it has ended. I want to agree with him. Every instinct my training has carved into me tells me to agree with him. But I keep circling back to the broadcasts I spent 8 years absorbing, the arguments this species has with itself about war and pride and stubbornness, the songs about refusing to kneel when everything around them insisted they should. I think of a species that fought itself for thousands of years and never once, in all that long and violent history, simply surrendered because someone larger told it to. The countdown falls past the 80-minute mark. Nothing changes on the human channels, no pleading, no offers, no fear. Out of habit, I pull the old intercepted archive, decades of recordings gathered from listening posts scattered near this system. I find fragments of speeches recorded long before we ever arrived, leaders standing before crowds, promising their people that surrender was not something done regardless of the size of the enemy. I remember dismissing these as performance the first time I studied them. Every species postures before it kneels. That is what 9,000 years of conquest is supposed to have proven. Except this silence does not feel like posturing. It feels like patience. A technician near the sensor array calls out faint gravitational disturbances at the very edge of the system, well beyond the human fleet, beyond even their outermost moon. The readings are small enough to dismiss as a passing comet. I ask her to run the analysis twice. Both times the numbers agree. Something massive passed through that region recently, and then it simply stopped being visible to us. I bring this to Solveth. He considers it for a moment and waves it away as an unrelated cosmic event. Comets do not concern us today, he says. Only the fear on that world concerns us. I do not argue because I have no proof, only a feeling that has been growing heavier since the countdown began. A feeling that the empty fleet beneath us is not a surrender but a curtain, hiding something we have not yet been permitted to see. 70 minutes remain. Still no answer from Earth. For the first time in the 8 years I have served under him, I see something other than calm cross the sovereign's face as he studies the silent channels, the smallest tightening around his eyes. Perhaps they require a demonstration, he says quietly, more to himself than to the bridge. He does not order an attack, not yet. The law of the reckoning hour is older than any officer serving under this banner, older than the sovereign himself. No weapon fires until the countdown reaches 0, or until the enemy fires first. It exists to prove our confidence to every world we take. We are so certain of our strength that we grant our enemies a full hour and a half to accept what is coming before we act. It has never failed. Until, perhaps, today, I request permission to search humanity's own transmissions for anything resembling military doctrine, rather than culture or entertainment. Solveth grants it without much interest, distracted by reports flooding in from other stations. I search quickly, pulling old technical broadcasts this species sent into orbit, believing no one capable of understanding them was listening. Most of it is fragmentary, decades old, but one pattern repeats across everything I find. Humans do not plan for quick victories. They plan for long wars. Every ship of theirs I have ever observed has been small, almost fragile by Imperium standards. It never occurred to me to ask what they might have built quietly in the years since they first noticed us watching. 60 minutes remain, and the first real transmission arrives from the human fleet. Not a surrender, not a plea. A short message, translated instantly by my own systems into words that silence the entire bridge. This is Earth. Your hour is already over. Ours is just beginning. The sovereign turns slowly toward the display where those 6 words glow in careful, deliberate English. For the first time since I have known him, he does not respond at once. He simply studies them as the countdown behind them continues to fall. And somewhere beneath my ribs, A cold certainty settles that we have made a terrible miscalculation, and that the 30,000 silent ships beneath us were never built to fight at all. They were only ever meant to make us watch the wrong patch of sky. The message repeats twice more, unhurried, as though the people below us have all the time that exists and we have none of it. Solveth orders the technicians to trace the transmission's point of origin, expecting to find it broadcast from one of the drifting hulls. Some last act of defiance from a doomed crew. Instead, the trace scatters across dozens of relay points throughout the system, deliberately impossible to pin to a single source. Whoever sent it wanted us to know they had sent it, and wanted us to have no idea from where. The Sovereign orders a full diagnostic sweep of every human vessel in view. I watch the results build across my console, and the picture that forms is stranger than anything I expected. These 30,000 ships carry no true crews at all. Life support runs at levels barely sufficient to keep a handful of maintenance routines active. Nothing close to what tens of thousands of living people would require. Weapon batteries read too low to threaten even a lightly shielded scout, let alone a warship of the Imperium. Solveth calls it exactly what it appears to be. A bluff. An empty fleet meant to make us hesitate before the real surrender arrives. I want to believe him. It would be easier. But I keep returning to one detail no one else on the bridge seems to be asking about. If this fleet was never meant to fight, then where is humanity's actual defense? Every species we have ever approached, even those who eventually knelt, gathered their true strength somewhere near their homeworld in the first tense minutes, desperate to look prepared even when they were not. Earth has shown us nothing of the kind. No hidden line forming near their moon. No orbital platforms powering up in a final show of pride. Only this silent curtain of ships, and beyond it, a planet that has not sent a single frightened voice into space. I request permission to review the historical sensor logs from 3 days ago, when our fleet first entered the outer edge of this system. Solveth grants it out of habit, rather than genuine interest, his attention pulled toward the flood of reports still trying to make sense of the human message. I pull the old scans and compare them against our current readings, and slowly, carefully, a pattern surfaces that tightens something in my chest. 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected faint industrial signatures near several of Earth's moons and scattered through a nearby asteroid belt. Readings consistent with mining operations. Unremarkable, unworthy of flagging. We were focused entirely on the planet itself, cataloging its cities and its weak, scattered defenses. Now, comparing those old readings against what our sensors show today, I notice that several of those faint signatures have gone completely dark, not destroyed, not damaged, simply switched off, as though whatever operated there no longer needed to hide behind the pretense of ordinary activity. I bring this to Solveth directly, laying the comparison across his display. He studies it for a long moment, his earlier confidence flickering. Perhaps the mining station shut down for safety, he offers, though his voice carries less certainty than before. Or perhaps, I say, choosing my words carefully, they were never mining stations at all. Before he can answer, a new alert flashes across the sensor grid, and this time even the most confident officers on the bridge fall quiet. Gravitational readings similar to the faint disturbance we detected earlier are now appearing simultaneously in multiple locations, clustered around the asteroid belt and near 2 of Earth's smaller moons. The readings are stronger now, unmistakable. The particular distortion caused by something enormous moving with great speed and greater control. The Sovereign's voice cuts through the murmurs building across the bridge. Identify those signatures immediately. The technicians work frantically, running every scanning protocol available to us, and the results only deepen the unease spreading through the room. Whatever is generating those distortions is shielded against nearly every detection method we possess, visible only in the brief instant before it moves again, slipping between one patch of darkness and the next. It is not one object. The readings suggest dozens of separate sources, possibly more, arranged across a wide arc of space curving in behind our own fleet's position. I feel the shape of the trap before I fully understand it, the way one senses a held breath in a room before someone finally exhales. The 30,000 ships beneath us were never meant to be humanity's true defense. They were placed exactly where we would look, drifting and silent and unmanned, drawing every sensor and every eye toward the empty spectacle of a fleet too weak to matter, while something else moved into position around us, hidden by the very confidence that has carried the Imperium through 9,000 years of unbroken conquest. I share this with Solvith quietly, careful not to let it reach the Sovereign before I am certain. Marshal, I believe the fleet in view was deployed as a distraction. Their true forces may already be closing on our position, using the decoy hulls and the countdown itself as cover. Solvith's expression hardens, and for the first time since I began serving under him, I see something close to genuine alarm cross his face. He orders an immediate perimeter scan, extending our range far beyond the human fleet, searching the space behind and around our formation rather than simply ahead of it toward the planet. The results take nearly 2 full minutes to compile, an eternity when every second feels heavier than the last. When the data resolves, the bridge falls into a silence deeper than any I have heard since this mission began. Along a wide curve behind our fleet, previously hidden by the gravitational shadow of a nearby dwarf planet, and by shielding technology far more advanced than anything we believed this species capable of producing, a second fleet becomes visible. Not 30,000 empty hulls this time. A few thousand vessels, far fewer in number, radiating power signatures that dwarf anything we detected from the decoy formation in front of the planet. These ships are crude by our standards. These ships are armed, and every one of them is positioned with precise, deliberate purpose along the flanks and rear of our formation. The Sovereign stares at the display for a long moment, his composure cracking only slightly at the edges, his voice remaining steady when he finally speaks. Impossible. No species advances this quickly. No species conceals an entire war fleet without a single leak, without one failed transmission reaching our listening posts across years of observation. I think of 8 years spent studying human broadcasts, searching for signs of fear, of desperation, of the posturing every conquered world displays before it finally kneels. I think of how carefully those broadcasts avoided any mention of true military strength, how every glimpse we were given of Earth's defenses showed exactly the kind of fragile, outdated technology that would make an Imperium fleet feel safe approaching. I understand now, far too late, that we were never watching Earth prepare to lose. We were watching Earth prepare a performance crafted with patience across years, designed specifically to convince us that this hour would end exactly the way every other hour in our history has ended. 50 minutes remain on the countdown. The human message repeats once more across every channel, calm and unwavering. This is Earth. Your hour is already over. Ours is just beginning. Solvith turns to the Sovereign, urgency finally breaking through the rigid formality that governs every exchange on this bridge. My lord, I recommend we abandon the reckoning hour and move to immediate defensive positioning. Whatever this second fleet intends, we should not remain vulnerable while we wait for a countdown that no longer serves any purpose. The Sovereign is silent for a long moment, and I understand in that silence the true weight of what is being asked of him. The reckoning hour is not simply tradition. It is the foundation the entire Imperium has built its reputation upon, a symbol of such overwhelming confidence that no enemy has ever dared test it. To abandon it now, in front of every officer on this bridge, in front of a species he has already declared conquered, would be to admit the confidence itself might have been misplaced from the beginning. We will not break protocol for a bluff, he finally says, though his voice carries less certainty than his words intend. Continue the countdown. Reinforce shields to combat levels as a precaution. Nothing more. Earth will surrender before the hour ends, as every world before them has surrendered. I want to point out that nothing about this situation resembles any world we have ever conquered, but rank holds my voice in place, even as every instinct built over years of studying this species screams that we are standing at the exact center of a trap, years in the making. 30 minutes remain. A quieter alert flashes across my console, easy to miss beneath the tension already gripping the bridge. Small vessels, no larger than shuttles, have begun drifting away from several points along the hidden fleet's position, moving toward our formation at speeds too low to register as an attack. too small to justify breaking the sovereign's order to hold fire. I report this to Solveth. He orders a closer scan. The results come back strange. These small vessels carry no visible weapons, no offensive systems of any kind. Their power is dedicated almost entirely to communication arrays and sensors. They are watching us, Solveth murmurs more to himself than to me, recording everything we do. I feel the shape of the design settle further into place, and the understanding chills me more than any weapon readout could. Every second of this countdown, every order given on this bridge, every flicker of hesitation the sovereign shows in front of his officers is being recorded, studied, prepared for a purpose I cannot yet fully imagine. Humanity is not simply defending itself today. It is building a record of exactly how the Imperium behaves under pressure, exactly how our confidence bends when it is finally tested. 10 minutes remain. The sovereign stands motionless at the center of the bridge, his gaze fixed on the hidden fleet's position, and for the first time I see something in his posture I never expected to witness in 8 years of service beneath him. Doubt, not fear, not yet. The particular stillness of a mind working through possibilities it never expected to need. Options, he says simply. Solveth hesitates only a moment. My lord, if their fleet intends to strike the instant the countdown reaches 0, our shields should absorb the opening exchange, and our numbers should allow us to overwhelm them regardless of position. If they intend something else, something we have not yet identified, our best option remains readiness rather than provocation. The sovereign considers this, then gives a single decisive nod. Reinforce all defensive systems immediately. Prepare full retaliatory sequence, ready to fire the instant the countdown ends, or the instant they act against us. We came to bring a world into the Imperium, and a world we will bring in, regardless of the games its people choose to play in these final minutes. I want to point out that nothing about the last hour suggests we are dealing with games, that every move humanity has made has been deliberate, patient, and precise in a way that feels less like desperation and more like a plan executed exactly as intended. The words remain locked behind rank and protocol, and I return to my console instead, watching the countdown fall toward 5 minutes, then 4, then 3. At 2 minutes, something changes. The small observation vessels near our formation power down their sensor arrays and begin retreating toward the hidden fleet, moving with a coordinated precision that leaves no doubt they are following a single unified command. I feel my chest tighten as I watch them go, understanding on some instinctive level that whatever they came to observe, they have finished observing it, and the true test is about to begin. 1 minute remains. The bridge falls into a silence so complete I can hear the quiet hum of the ship's systems beneath the tension, the small mechanical sounds that usually disappear beneath activity and conversation. Every officer stands at their station, watching either the countdown or the hidden fleet, waiting to see which arrives first. 30 seconds. The sovereign's hand rests on the edge of the command console, his knuckles pale against the dark surface. Watching him, I realize that even now, even with everything we have discovered in the last hour, some part of him still believes Earth will surrender in these final seconds, that the ancient pattern of the reckoning hour will hold exactly as it always has, that 9,000 years of unbroken success cannot possibly end here, against a species we first noticed only decades ago. 10 seconds. 5. The countdown reaches 0, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, absolutely nothing happens. The bridge holds its collective breath in that impossible silence, and I allow myself one brief, foolish moment to believe that perhaps the sovereign was right after all, that the humans have simply run out the clock in some final act of stubbornness before finally sending the surrender we have waited 90 minutes to receive. Then the sensors erupt with light. Every ship in the hidden human fleet moves at once, engines flaring to life with a precision suggesting the command was given long before the countdown ever reached 0, waiting only for that exact moment to execute. They do not charge toward us in the chaotic rush I would expect from a smaller force facing overwhelming numbers. They move instead like a single organism, flowing into the exact gaps in our formation where our shield coverage overlaps least effectively, gaps that should be nearly impossible to identify without detailed knowledge of Imperium shield architecture. I feel a cold certainty settle over me as the first strikes land, precise and devastating, targeting not the thickest armor of our largest vessels, but the specific junctions where shield generators connect to hull structure, points of weakness our own engineers consider nearly theoretical, so difficult to strike that no enemy has ever managed it before. Ship after ship along our outer formation shudders under impacts that should not be possible with the weapon technology we believed Earth possessed only hours ago. Solveth shouts orders across the bridge, his composure finally breaking under the strain of watching decades of doctrine collapse in real time. Return fire full spread. Target their lead vessels. The Illyrian's Grace powers its own batteries around us, and I feel the ship shudder as it unleashes its first offensive strike of the engagement. A wall of energy aimed at the nearest human vessels. Against any fleet we have encountered before, the strike would have been devastating. Instead, I watch in disbelief as the human ships scatter with impossible speed, their formations breaking apart and reforming in patterns that seem to anticipate exactly where our weapons will fire before we fire them. Only a handful of shots connect, and even those seem to do less damage than our targeting systems predicted, as though the human vessels carry defensive systems calibrated specifically against the exact weapon signatures the Imperium has used for centuries. I understand, watching this unfold, why the 30,000 decoy ships mattered so much beyond simply distracting our attention. They were not only a curtain hiding the true fleet behind them, they were also a study. Every scan we ran against those empty hulls during the countdown, every attempt to analyze their weak points, fed directly into whatever process the true human fleet used to calibrate its own defenses in these final minutes before the engagement began. We spent the entire hour unknowingly showing our enemy exactly how we intended to fight them. The Sovereign's voice cuts through the chaos building across the bridge, sharp with an authority that still carries the weight of 9,000 years of unbroken command, even as everything around us suggests that authority may finally be meeting its limit. Divert full power to forward shields. Concentrate fire on their capital vessels. We have faced greater numbers before and prevailed. We will prevail again today. But even as he gives the order, I notice something on my display that deepens the cold certainty in my chest into something closer to genuine alarm. The human fleet is not simply fighting with skill and precision. It is fighting with patience, drawing our largest vessels into positions that seem almost too convenient, hurting our formation with subtle, deliberate maneuvers rather than brute force, the way a skilled hunter guides prey toward a waiting trap rather than simply chasing it down. The Illyrian's Grace shudders again under another precise strike, this one closer to our own position near the ship's center, and I grip the edge of my console as alarms sound across the bridge, warning of damage to systems I never expected to see threatened in my lifetime of service. Somewhere beneath the chaos of the engagement I can still hear, faintly, through the ship's communication systems, the echo of that same calm human transmission repeating one final time before the noise of battle drowns it out completely. This is Earth. Your hour is already over. Ours is just beginning. Smoke fills the lower corridors of the Illyrian's Grace, though our ship carries no true fire, only the thick chemical haze released when shield generators overload and burn through their casings. I brace against my console as another impact rocks the bridge, and I watch the tactical display continue to shift in ways that no longer resemble anything close to a fair contest between forces. Solveth shouts new orders, his voice now edged with open urgency after an hour of held tension. Fall back to secondary formation. Protect the flagship at all costs. Around us, the surviving vessels of our fleet attempt to comply, engines flaring as they try to pull back into a tighter defensive shell around the Grace. But the human ships anticipate the movement before it fully begins, sliding into the gaps our retreat creates with a timing that feels less like combat and more like a rehearsed performance practiced 1,000 times before this day ever arrived. I watch one of our largest support cruisers attempt to shield the Grace's flank, only for 3 human vessels to strike its weakened generator junction in near-perfect unison, the exact vulnerability our own engineers considered too difficult for any enemy to reliably target. Its shields collapse entirely within seconds and the ship drifts out of formation, crippled but not destroyed, its remaining systems venting atmosphere into the vacuum in a long silver plume visible even from our position. I realize, watching this happen again and again across our formation, that the humans are not fighting to destroy us. Ship after ship suffers the same pattern. Precise strikes to shield junctions and propulsion systems, disabling rather than obliterating, leaving crews alive but powerless, vessels drifting but intact. It would be easy to mistake this restraint for mercy, and some part of me, still clinging to the last shreds of Imperium pride, wants to believe that is exactly what it is. But watching the calm, controlled precision of every strike, I understand it is not mercy at all. It is control. Humanity is choosing exactly how much damage to inflict, exactly which systems to disable, with a confidence that leaves no doubt they could have chosen destruction instead, and simply decided against it for reasons of their own. The Sovereign stands at the center of the bridge, his composure finally beginning to crack in ways I never expected to witness. His hands grip the edge of the command console tightly enough that I can see the strain in his posture even from across the room. Around him, officers deliver damage reports in increasingly strained voices, each one detailing another vessel disabled, another section of our formation collapsing under the weight of an attack we still do not fully understand. "Status of the eastern flank," the Sovereign demands, an edge in his voice I have never heard in 8 years of service beneath him. "Collapsed, my lord," comes the reply. 12 vessels disabled, no losses reported. But all 12 are drifting without power, unable to rejoin the formation. "Western flank," he demands next and receives nearly identical news. Another significant portion of our fleet rendered helpless without a single vessel actually destroyed. I understand, listening to these reports accumulate, that humanity is not simply winning this engagement. They are demonstrating something, proving a point with a precision that feels almost surgical in its restraint. And I begin to suspect that whatever point they intend to prove, we are about to discover it whether we wish to or not. I return my attention to the tactical display and notice the slow, deliberate herding pattern I identified earlier has nearly completed its purpose. The Illyrian's Grace, along with a small cluster of remaining escort vessels, has been pushed by the accumulated pressure of the engagement into a position nearly isolated from the rest of our fleet, surrounded on almost every side by human vessels that have stopped advancing entirely, holding position in a tight, controlled perimeter around us. I bring this to Solveth immediately, my voice tight with the certainty of what it means. "Marshal, we have been isolated. The human fleet has stopped attacking. I believe they intend to force a direct confrontation with the flagship specifically." Solveth's face pales as he studies the display himself, and for a long moment neither of us speaks, understanding settling over the bridge in a silence heavier than any alarm or damage report. The Sovereign notices the shift in atmosphere and turns toward us, his expression demanding an explanation before either of us can offer one voluntarily. "Report," he commands. "My lord," Solveth says carefully, "the enemy fleet has ceased offensive action against our remaining forces. Our position has been isolated from the rest of the formation. I believe they intend some form of direct communication or confrontation, specifically with this vessel." The Sovereign's jaw tightens, and I watch him wrestle visibly with the weight of a decision he never expected to face in his lifetime of unbroken command. Around us, the human fleet holds its position with a discipline that carries no trace of triumph or aggression, simply a patient, watchful stillness that feels somehow more unsettling than the earlier chaos of open combat. A new transmission arrives, cutting through the tense silence of the bridge, and this time it does not repeat the earlier message. A new voice speaks instead, translated instantly by my own systems into the careful, measured tones of a language I recognize immediately as English, though the voice itself carries none of the fear or desperation the Imperium has come to expect from every conquered world before this one. This is Fleet Commander Renata Cole of the Terran Continuity, speaking directly to Sovereign Ashkelon Voss. "Your flagship is currently isolated and unable to receive reinforcement. Your remaining fleet has been disabled without significant loss of life on either side, a choice we made deliberately and could have made differently. We are prepared to discuss terms. We recommend you consider that offer carefully, because it will not remain available indefinitely." The bridge falls into a silence so complete I can hear my own pulse in my ears. The sovereign stands motionless, staring at the display where the message continues to glow in careful, deliberate translation, and I understand, watching him, that we have arrived at the exact moment this entire engagement was designed to produce. Not humanity's destruction, not even the Imperium's destruction. Something else entirely. Something that feels, for the first time in 9,000 years of conquest, like a negotiation offered from a position of genuine strength rather than desperate surrender. The sovereign turns to Solveth, his voice quieter now than I have ever heard it, stripped of the absolute confidence that has defined every moment of his command since I first joined this fleet. What forces remain to us? Solveth studies the tactical display for a long moment before answering. The Grace remains functional, though our shields are significantly weakened. Approximately 8 escort vessels remain capable of limited combat action. The remainder of our fleet, my lord, is disabled but largely intact. Casualties have been minimal compared to the scale of the engagement. I notice something in Solveth's voice as he delivers this report. A note of confusion layered beneath the exhaustion, and I recognize it because I feel the same confusion myself. Minimal casualties, an entire fleet disabled and outmaneuvered at every turn, and yet remarkably few lives lost on either side. It does not match anything in the Imperium's long history of conquest, where victory has always been measured as much by the scale of destruction inflicted as by the outcome achieved. Humanity has just demonstrated overwhelming tactical superiority, while somehow avoiding the devastating losses such a victory would normally require. I understand slowly that this restraint was never an accident. It was as carefully planned as every other element of this engagement. The sovereign stands in silence for a long moment, and I watch something shift behind his eyes. The particular stillness of a mind confronting a truth it has spent an entire lifetime believing impossible. "Open a channel," he finally says, his voice quiet but steady. "I will speak with this fleet commander directly." I move to comply immediately, my hands working across my console to establish the connection, and as the channel opens I feel the strange, dizzying awareness that I am about to witness something no officer of the Imperium has ever witnessed before in the long history of our empire. Not a surrender delivered by a conquered world, trembling and desperate, but a conversation offered calmly between equals, by a species we arrived here fully believing incapable of anything but quiet submission. The channel connects, and for a moment neither side speaks, the silence stretching between two fleets that have just fought each other to a standstill, unlike anything either has ever experienced before. Then the sovereign draws himself up to his full height, gathering whatever remains of his composure, and speaks the first words of what I already suspect will become one of the most important conversations in the history of our empire. "I am listening, Commander Cole," he says. "Speak your terms." The image resolves on our main display, and for the first time in 8 years of studying this species from a distance, I see a human being look directly at a sovereign of the Thren Imperium without a trace of fear in her expression. Commander Renata Cole appears younger than I expected, her uniform simple compared to the ceremonial robes filling our own bridge, her posture calm in a way that feels earned rather than performed. "Sovereign Ashkelon Voss," she begins, her voice steady, carrying none of the triumph I might have expected from a species that has just accomplished something no other world has ever managed against us. "I want to start by saying that nothing about today was intended as cruelty. Every strike our fleet made was calculated specifically to disable, not destroy. Your crews are alive. Your ships, though damaged, remain largely intact. That was a deliberate choice, and I want you to understand why we made it before we discuss anything else." The sovereign's jaw tightens, and I can see the effort it costs him to answer with anything resembling composure. "You speak as though restraint earns you some form of gratitude," he says. "You have humiliated an empire 9,000 years in the making." Cole does not flinch at this, though something in her expression softens slightly, less triumphant than thoughtful. "We didn't do this for gratitude, Sovereign. We did it because we studied your history the same way you studied ours, and we learned that every world the Imperium has ever conquered was given exactly one choice: kneel or be destroyed. We wanted to show you there was a third option. One your empire has apparently never encountered before today. I watch the sovereign absorb this, and I notice Solveth beside me has gone very still, his attention fixed entirely on the exchange unfolding across the display. Other officers have quietly abandoned their stations to listen, the ordinary business of running a warship forgotten in the face of a conversation that feels like it is reshaping the fundamental rules our entire military culture has operated under for longer than any of us have been alive. Explain, the sovereign says finally, the single word carrying more weight than any full sentence could. Cole nods slightly as if she expected the request. 3 years ago, your listening posts intercepted our communications and began studying us. What you didn't know is that we noticed your listening posts almost as quickly as you noticed us. We spent those 3 years learning everything we could about the Imperium, your history, your conquests, the pattern you follow with every world you approach. We learned that your empire has never once faced genuine resistance, because every species you've encountered either surrendered immediately or fought back with technology so far beneath yours that the outcome was never truly in question. We built our entire strategy around one simple fact. You have never had to adapt because you have never needed to. I feel the truth of this settle over me with an uncomfortable weight, understanding now why the 30,000 decoy ships worked so effectively, why the Hidden Fleet's precision felt almost supernatural in its accuracy. It was never supernatural. It was simply the result of a species studying its enemy with the same careful patience the Imperium has spent millennia not needing to develop, because no one has ever forced us to. The sovereign is silent for a long moment before speaking again, his voice quieter now, stripped further of the imperial authority that has defined every word he has spoken since I first joined this fleet. What do you want from us now? What terms do you intend to demand? Cole's expression shifts, and for the first time something that might be called satisfaction crosses her features, though it carries no cruelty in it. We're not interested in conquering your empire, Sovereign. That was never the goal. We want 3 things, and I think you'll find them more reasonable than you expect. She raises a single finger. First, Earth remains independent permanently with no future demands for surrender or integration from the Imperium. Second, your empire will cease all further contact with our solar system unless we initiate it ourselves. And third, and this is the part I suspect will surprise you most, we want you to carry a message back to every world within your empire that has ever surrendered to the Imperium out of fear rather than genuine agreement. We want them to know that resistance is possible. We want them to know exactly what happened here today. I watch the Sovereign's face carefully as this final term registers, and I understand immediately why Cole saved it for last. The first 2 terms are almost generous by the standards of what the Imperium typically demands from conquered worlds. But the third term is not generous at all. It is a deliberate strike aimed not at our fleet or our military strength, but at the very foundation of how the Imperium has maintained control over 9,000 years of conquered territory, an empire held together as much by the belief that resistance is impossible as by any actual military dominance. You ask me to plant the seed of my own empire's unraveling, the Sovereign says slowly, understanding dawning in his voice. Cole does not deny it. I ask you to tell the truth, Sovereign. What your empire does with that truth is entirely up to you. But I think you already understand that a truth once spoken cannot be unspoken again. Every world under your control will eventually learn what happened here today, whether you tell them or we do. We would simply prefer it come from you, with whatever dignity that choice allows you to keep. The silence that follows stretches long enough that I begin to wonder if the Sovereign will refuse entirely, will choose destruction over the humiliation of carrying this message back to an empire that has never known him as anything but absolute in his authority. I watch him closely, and I see the exact moment something shifts behind his eyes. The recognition that refusal here offers nothing but the certain destruction of what remains of our fleet, while acceptance at least offers the chance to shape how this story is eventually told. I accept your terms, Fleet Commander, he says finally, each word costing him visibly. Earth will remain independent. The Imperium will withdraw from your solar system, and make no further contact unless invited. And I will carry your message back to my empire, though I make no promise of how it will be received. That's all we ask, Cole replies, and something in her tone suggests genuine respect rather than triumph, an acknowledgement of the difficulty of what the sovereign has just agreed to. We'll begin releasing your disabled vessels immediately. Your crews will find their propulsion and shield systems restored within the hour. We ask only that your fleet depart our system without further incident. The channel closes, and the bridge falls into a silence unlike anything I have experienced in 8 years of service. Around me, officers stand at their stations, processing the enormity of what has just occurred. An agreement negotiated not from a position of desperate surrender, but between two forces that have just proven themselves capable of standing against each other as something closer to equals. I am pulled from my thoughts by a quiet request relayed through the ship's communication system, addressed specifically to me. Fleet Commander Cole has asked for a brief conversation with the Imperium's lead intelligence officer, the one responsible for translating the initial ultimatum. I feel a strange mixture of apprehension and curiosity as I make my way to a private communication terminal, wondering what a human commander could possibly want from someone whose entire role in this engagement was simply turning threats into words her people would understand. The connection opens and Cole's face appears before me, her expression calmer now, more relaxed than the careful formality she maintained while speaking with the sovereign. "You did the language work on that ultimatum," she says. Not quite a question. I confirm it, uncertain what response she expects from me. "Your translation was excellent," she says, something almost like a smile touching her expression. "Genuinely well done considering how difficult our language can be to render accurately. I wanted you to know that, because I suspect you're one of the few people on that ship who actually took the time to understand us rather than simply catalog our weaknesses. I do not know how to respond to this, and something in my hesitation must show, because Cole continues without waiting for a reply. "I read your service record when we intercepted your fleet's communications. 8 years studying our broadcasts. That's a long time to spend learning about a people you were told would simply surrender the moment they saw your ships. I imagine that gave you a different perspective than most of your colleagues." I consider her words carefully before answering, choosing my response with more honesty than I expect the Imperium's rigid protocols would normally permit. "I did begin to suspect over those years that your species would not respond the way our doctrine predicted. I admit I did not fully understand how deep that difference ran until today." Cole nods, as if this confirms something she already suspected. "That's more self-awareness than most conquerors ever manage. I hope your empire listens to what you learned today, even if I suspect it won't be easy for them to hear it." The conversation ends shortly after, and I return to my station as the bridge begins the slow process of coordinating our fleet's withdrawal, disabled vessels gradually regaining power as promised, crews reporting in with a mixture of relief and quiet humiliation that I suspect will follow this fleet for the rest of its existence. I watch the sovereign stand at the center of the bridge, his posture still upright, still carrying the outward appearance of imperial authority, though something fundamental has clearly shifted behind his composed expression. As our fleet begins its slow retreat from the solar system, I find myself looking back one final time at the small blue and white world we arrived, believing we would conquer within a single hour and a half. I think about the 8 years I spent studying this species from a distance, listening to their broadcasts, learning their languages, quietly building an understanding that none of my superiors ever thought worth taking seriously. I think about the 30,000 empty ships that drew our attention exactly where humanity wanted it, and the hidden fleet that waited with a patience I am not certain the Imperium has ever demonstrated in its entire long history of conquest. I think most of all about the message the sovereign now carries back to an empire that has never once questioned its own inevitability. A message that will eventually reach every world under Imperium control, whispered first in quiet uncertainty before growing, I suspect, into something far louder. I do not know what will become of the Imperium once that message spreads, whether it will strengthen our empire through the lesson learned here, or whether it will begin the slow unraveling of 9,000 years of unquestioned authority. What I know, watching Earth shrink slowly behind us as our fleet withdraws in something far closer to retreat than victory, is that the galaxy has just learned something today that it will not soon forget. There is a difference between a species too weak to resist and a species patient enough to wait for the exact moment resistance becomes overwhelming. Today, for the first time in the long history of the Thran Imperium, we finally understood which one we had found. And somewhere behind us, on a small world we once believed would simply kneel, I imagine the countdown clock we built to demonstrate our own inevitability, now running in reverse, counting down instead toward the moment the rest of the galaxy finally learns what 30,000 silent ships were truly capable of teaching.